Hey, it's Frank here with 4D Honeybee. Just doing an inspection of my mystery hive just to see if I can try to decide whether or not to split this hive soon or just make it a honey production hive. I'm not sure either way. I'd like to split it, but I'm only going to split it if the bees have calmed down. They were pretty nasty in fall with the mite treatments and in spring with the mite treatments. They got to be a bit of a handful, and so I may not want to split them because of that reason, or I may want to split them so that at least half of its genetics go away. This is a bug that I did an earlier video on. Starting to see this thing in my hive, so it's definitely not a hive beetle, but it's some kind of varmint that is that I'm going to have to take a close look for. So I'm going to do an inspection here. I'm also going to, well, a decent number of bees on the lid here. It's a gorgeous day here in Toronto. It's about 22 degrees, which probably is, what is it, 76, mid to high 70s. And we just have not had much of a spring at all yet. It's just starting to feel like spring now. We had a very long, not necessarily a prolonged winter, but a prolonged transition from winter to spring. The month of April was a total write-off for bees. They say that that bee producers here are about a month behind, and sure enough, the guy that I order my nukes from, my nukes that normally would be here by now, by second week of May, are not going to arrive until mid-June. So they are a month behind, and so are the bees. Now, these bees overwintered well. It was a strong hive going in. Didn't make any honey last year, but made good numbers of bees, which was great. But just started to turn nasty near the end of the year. So I want to, and this hive was a very calm hive beforehand, so I want to make sure that it's not become a nasty beehive. So what I'm going to talk about too as I go is 5 things that you need to do in spring to ensure healthy bees. Now, I found this really important because this is my 3rd year beekeeping, but it's the first year that my bees overwintered successfully. So I found that I got into spring with 3 healthy hives, or at least 2.5 healthy hives. One hive was still kind of sad, but it's doing better. And I didn't know really the difference between starting from nukes and starting with 3 healthy hives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and tell you the 3 things that, or the 5 things, I guess, the top 5 list that I think is important. As always, these lists are pretty subjective. Everyone will have a different list. Everyone will have different priorities. But at least these are talking points that can start you off. Look at these bees. Wow, look at that honey. Very nice. Looking for the queen on the lid. Looks like these bees are a lot more calm than before. I see some drones already in there. See that big drone there? Wandering around, wondering what to do. Always a good sign to see some drones. So I'm going to inspect this hive a little more closely because I haven't had a real chance to because it's been so mean. I hate to sound like a bit of a wimp, but nobody likes getting stung by bees. I don't care how much you beekeep, it hurts. Okay, so five things to do. First and most important thing, in my opinion, in spring, is to make sure you have a right laying queen. Okay, and that you may think is kind of self-explanatory, but you got to make sure that the queen is in there and that she's laying brood, right? And that she's doing so in a good pattern, because these hives need bees right away in spring to forage, right? Their stores are really low or non-existent. Jeepers. And they got to get at it. And it's hard for them to get at it if they don't have bees. Look at this frame of honey. Get off there, bees. It's pretty nice. This whole frame is absolutely chock-a-block full of nectar that they are now capping for honey. So, and that's what I expect. I would expect to see the first few frames, maybe the first 3 frames to be honey frames, and then some pollen, and then hopefully some brood as well. So yeah, number one, find your right laying queen, right? Make sure that she is laying. The second thing you most likely need to do in the spring is start feeding these bees, right? If they have a whole bunch of brood happening, they gotta feed them. And in this case, this year, this is another honey frame, but it's got some weird bit of well, that's drone comb there, but this might be a supersedure cell that they're building. I'm gonna just see if there's an egg in that thing. No, it's just a weird area where they're kind of building bridge comb. It's kind of funny looking. And on this side you can see it's another nice side of honey, right? Nectar that is becoming capped honey. So yeah, feed the bees, right? They're going to need pollen for those young as soon as they start hatching. So it's never a bad idea to get some pollen patties in there, or pollen substitute or something, so that they can have that. Because I find that we often talk about feeding them sugar water, but we don't often cover feeding the bees pollen. So get some pollen in there and some sugar water so that you could feed them. Then I think the next thing you got to do is probably check for mites, right? Now I haven't done this yet because I'm just not sophisticated enough, but if you do a mite count in the spring, then you know the numbers that you're dealing with, right? This is a nice frame of honey and pollen. And some of the bees are just jam-packed with pollen on their legs there. Lots of drone brood on the bottom of this one, some brood in this frame. This is a very nice, kind of typical brood frame. So you can see there's honey all around the outside. It's a lot of honey, a little more than you'd normally see on a brood frame. And then brood being built, being laid from the inside out in concentric circles. There's some pollen around there too, so that they can feed. I'm just going to look for eggs here as well. Looking for supersedure cells or swarm cells as well. That's another thing you've got to do. So you've checked for your right laying queen, you've checked for your, you've fed them, and then you probably have to do swarm preparation, which means either looking for signs of a swarm or at least preparing to catch your own swarm if they do happen to swarm. So I built a swarm box and placed it close to the hive just in case I might be able to catch my own swarm. So swarm preparation is the third thing I think you should do. Wow, beautiful brood frame here. This is absolutely textbook. This queen is doing amazingly. Just look at this frame. You've got your larva, eggs, and some capped brood starting to happen. Honey all around the outside. It's just textbook stuff. And this could be a frame that the queen is on. So let's have a quick look for her here. Nope, I don't see her. Okay, so I think I've gone far enough into this box. I'm going to put this box back together, and then I'm going to look into the bottom box and just look for signs of swarm cells. And then I'm going to put a honey super on this box and let them start making honey. Because you can see they're pretty calm now, so I was really concerned about that going in with this hive. Just a couple bees coming up at me, but nothing too serious, I think. And it's funny, I just say that now, and now there's a bee that's not at all happy. You can tell the bees are not getting happy. This is just one, so it's not too bad. But you can see, maybe you can see this bee bouncing off my head here. He's trying to get at me, or she's trying to get at me in a bad way. So I'm going to close this top up. I'm going to check for swarm cells underneath this frame, underneath this box, and then I'm going to put a honey super on to let them start making honey, okay? And so what are we at now? Okay, we've done mite control. So we've done a right laying queen. We've done feeding the bees, and we've done swarm control, right? Or did I do mites? Yeah, I think I did swarms. Next thing you gotta do is treat for mites, right? So again, treating for mites, really the sophisticated way to do it is to do an actual mite count, and there's lots of good resources online for how to do that. I didn't do that this year because my mentor and the bee society of this area said that it was a really hard winter and that mites are really taking a toll on the hives, so they just suggested to do like a light treatment anyway, no matter what. So that's what I ended up doing. And but you should do a mite count and see if it's needed. I'm just checking underneath here, and I don't see any swarm cells, but I do see a lot of bees in this hive. So I'm going to add a honey super to this one too, and let them continue to produce. They seem to be pretty happy. They're not bugging me all that much, which is great. And hopefully this hive will produce honey this year. Like I said, last year it didn't produce honey, but produced a lot of bees, right? Yeah, the other thing, probably the last thing, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily do this last. I think you got to do this as soon as you open up the hive in the spring, is check for food stores, right? You got to make sure they've got enough to make it through the winter. So, or sorry, yeah, make it through the spring actually. So, again, I think I've messed up the count here because I've lost my train of thought, but I'll try to recap for you. 5 things to do in the spring are to check for a right laying queen, check for food stores, do a mite treatment, do some swarm preparation or prevention, or both, right? Now these guys are getting nasty. And treat for mites, that's another important thing to do. And I think that's got it. I think that's all. So hopefully that's 5. I'll have to recheck the video. It's hard to make these videos when these bees are getting nasty, and that's exactly what's happening now. So anyway, we'll cap this up. We will put another honey super on it, and then we'll call it. So for this hive, I'm going to use a queen excluder and just see how it does, because we're so early in the season. Last time I used a queen excluder, it actually prevented the bees from moving up and making honey, right? But I'm going to try it because it's obviously the most effective way to prevent bees from going up into the honey supers. I've got a 9-frame super that I'm putting up here. I only used 9 frames because I like them to draw the frames wider than they would if there were 10 frames in there, and I had a lot of success with that last year. So just going to bump up the camera here a little bit for you to see. There you go. You see how it's just 9 frames. I'll space them out equally, and I've got lots of them are drawn out already, so these bees should have a nice head start. But you can see how this one gets drawn out wider than the actual edge of the frame here, and that's why I do that, so that it just makes for more efficient honey harvesting, right? It means that that each frame, sorry about that, each frame ends up having more honey on it, and you have to do less work to extract the same amount of honey. So that's it. I'll button this up in a second here. And again, just to recap, the top 5 things, not necessarily in this order, is you want to check for a right laying queen, you want to check for food stores, you want to treat for mites, you want to do swarm preparation, and you want to feed these guys. Okay? If nothing else, if you can do most or some of those things, you got a pretty good chance of heading into summer with some healthy bees and healthy hives. So that's it for me. It's Frank here from 4D Honeybee. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.